Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I can't believe it's Thursday all over again. I don't know where the weeks are going. So welcome to my YouTube channel. I thought I'd pop by today and create a simple card. I just feel like doing something simple, nothing too overly complicated. And I want to use colours that I've got on my desk and products that I've got on my desk. And I want to use a couple of older stamps. That's all I know what I'm doing really. So I've got my brayer on my desk because I had that from my previous video that I did yesterday or the day before, whichever day it was. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use tumbled glass and bundled sage, two lovely subtle colours to use together. And I think what I'll do is I'll use the bundled sage first. Now I've got a 5" by 7" piece of card, and you might be wondering why I've got it at a slant. The reason I've got it at a slant is so that I can brayer a little bit easier with the camera being here, and I can brayer at that angle. It would also, I can make it a bit easier on myself. What I've done is I've applied a piece of low tack tape just down one side here, one side here, not down these areas. So just top and bottom, I've applied some low tack tape, some Scotch low tack tape, and I'm just adding it at an angle just so I can brayer a little bit easier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Distress Oxides and I'm just going to apply that to my brayer. And like any implement, any tool, I'm sort of priming it with ink. So I'm priming that with ink. And I've sort of avoided the edges of my brayer, but it doesn't really matter because I'm going to start brayering over on the low tack tape. So it's not too much of a problem at all. And what I'm going to do, it's sort of a flicking action and coming in to the card. So I've started off onto the low tack tape, and then I'm coming in to the centre. So I'll just take some more ink. Hopefully you can see this just on the side. Just take a little bit more ink, and I'm just using, I'm sort of flicking the brayer. I'm flicking it and lifting it, so it's like a flicking action going up, flick, lift, up, flick, lift, and it's going quite quickly just so that I can add light layers. And have you noticed I'm not going back in with any more ink yet? There's quite a bit of ink on that brayer, so I'm just taking my time just to add that ink. So as you can see, I've got quite a depth of colour here, lighter at the edges. That's fine. I can keep adding a little bit more colour. Just come down this edge here where there's a little bit less colour. And it's a nice way just to create a simple background, nothing that's too complicated. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tumbled glass. I haven't used tumbled glass apart from the other day when I used it, and when I used it in my workshop. I haven't used it for quite a while, so it's quite nice to get it out. But look at those two colours on the brayer. Don't they look lovely just on the brayer? I know I'm slightly odd, but there you go. And with the oxides, the colours blend beautifully. And what you need to do to add a little bit more texture, keep brayering your card. Don't keep just adding the ink, keep brayering. It adds texture to your card. So if you want a little bit more ink, start off on the low tack tape and bring it in. So you start off here and then you bring it in. If you want it darker in colour, start further in on your card. So start here and bring your colour in if you want it paler. If you want the colour darker, then start straight away near the edge of the card. Now it just takes a little bit of time just to build this colour up. You just need to remember not to be in too much of a rush. It's just about building the layers of the colour up. So I think, let's have a look at that colour. You then need to just wipe your brayer or brayer it off onto a scrap piece of card. Let me just, so this is what we've got so far. Let's just grab a scrap piece of card, just so that we can brayer off. Let's move those ink pads out of the way, just so that we can brayer off any excess. But to be honest, there shouldn't really be much ink on that brayer, because I've literally brayered off continually until the brayer's dry. So there's nothing coming off on a piece of card, but still wipe it with your baby wipe or damp cloth, because even though there's none coming off on a card or a piece of white card, it does come off on your baby wipe. But just look at that, my brayer looks a beautiful colour with the bundle sage and the tumbled glass. What I'm going to do now is I've got this older set. Now, I adore the sentiments on this set. Inspired by nature, enjoy the simple things, and the beauty of nature is everywhere. I think that's just beautiful sentiments. And the set is actually called Beauty of Nature, and it's stamp set 328. And I always like to stand by my promises. I always say that I will continue to use the older sets as well as the new sets. And I do like to stick by the promises. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this ivy here. If you don't want to use the ivy, there's a beautiful foliage set here as well, foliage stamp here as well. So you could use that as well. I'm just going to tilt my card so I can put it where I want. There we go. I'm going to use my ivy, and I'm going to use the colours that I had on my desk previously from a previous video. So we've got Verdant, we've got Shady Lane, and we've got Pine Cone VersaFine Clair inks. Let's just move that stamp out of the way because it's doing nothing but getting in the way. And what I'm going to do is ink my ivy up just with the Verdant. Then I'm going to take some touches of the Shady Lane and then some touches of the Pine Cone. I'm just going to leave those open for now. And the reason I've turned my card is so that I can reach. I'm not sort of, if I leave it like that, I'm trying to get my hand around the camera. So I'm just moving it just to make it a little bit easier for me. So I'm going to stamp this ivy just around the edges, and I do love all the different tones of colour. So let's get some. What we're going to do now is just grab a scrap of paper, at the rate I'm going everything will be dry. I'm so slow today. Just want the lower edges of the lower bits of the ivy that are inked up. So I'm just going to take a little bit of those as well and just add a little bit of those lower ones. And then I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to take the Verdant, and really I'm just inking the top half of the ivy, and then I'm just going to add a little bit. So I'm adding those three colours once again, just to give me a few tones of colour, just to give me different tones of that colour. So if you want, you can just add the Verdant and just add that. Move your stamp set around a little bit. It's always good to move your stamp set around, just so it looks different each time. And then you can add second generation stamping, just to give a little bit more depth. If you had that second and third generation stamping, just gives it a little bit more depth and makes it a little bit more interesting. Just wipe that. And just so that you can see, just so that it gives a little bit of that layered stamping. Right, what do I want to do now? Yes, I think we'll go for the brown. So what I'm going to do now, let me just find, is remove that ivy. Place that back on my stamp set, and I've just nudged the camera because I'm such a professional. And on the stamp set is what I call a filler stamp. This little one here, just so that you can see that little one there. And really you only need an A7 block for this. But have I got an A7 block? So let's just place that little stamp there. Remove that one. And just take this little one here. And what I'm going to do is just take the pine cone stamp set. I don't know why I've moved the card round, because I just need it to be round this way. And I'm just going to add some of these little dots just to add to the foliage feel. And you know, it's funny, the little dots do actually fill it out nicely and do make it look a little bit more fuller. Let me just lift that up again. Now what you have to remember is that this low tack tape here is going to be wet. What I suggest is you just wipe off, just so that you don't dip your fingers in all this ink. So just wipe it. You just then don't dip your fingers. And what you can get an idea of, if you wipe it, you can get an idea that you've got your white card underneath here, and you can get an idea of what it's going to look like. So what I'm going to do now is just place that there. We're just going to get a piece of cut and dry foam. See if we've got the right green. There we go. As you can see, I'm not using too many colours, and what I've got is I've got a circle, which you want to know the size. Might be 2¼ inches. Let me just measure that. Yep, 2¼ inches. But it doesn't really matter because you're not using the whole circle anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the circle just on here like this. You don't always have to have a whole circle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the bundled sage. Just add that bundled sage, and I'm just going to start at the centre and start dragging the colour out. So start at the centre of your circle and drag the colour out. You can turn your card, your actual card, if you wish, just to make it easier, just to go around that circle. And what you need to do is start at the centre and drag out. But what you need to do is just add a couple of layers. I find it easy starting at the centre and dragging out rather than going like this, because you then ink this area as well, and I don't want all that area inking there. So I'm just dragging out the colour, just because it makes it a little bit easier. Turn that card around again and drag it out again. There we go. Let me just look at that in camera. Let's lift that up so you can see each stage, just so that you can see that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that ivy stamp again. And this is the thing when you're going with the flow. When you haven't got a card already pre-made, obviously you're going with instinct. When you've got a card pre-made, you're literally copying that card. What I'm going is I'm going with my instincts here. And what I want to do is I just want to add a little bit of ivy just inside just inside that aperture. So let's just take a little bit of a darker colour now, just inking up the 2 leaves at the top, just to add a little bit more, just to add it so it carries on a little bit. I don't want to do the whole area, I just want to do little parts of it. And then I want to take this little stamp again, just with the brown pine cone, VersaFine Clair, and just add, you can do 1st generation, 2nd generation if you wish. It's entirely up to you. There we go. Keep that one on there because I'm probably going to use that again. Just going to wipe that low tack tape, just so I don't get my card in a mess. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my Pheasant stamp set. Now this is a beautiful image and I've used the pheasants quite a lot, but I fancy using these little ones here. This is a well-used stamp set. I always find this one easy to use. Can you tell that I'm actually into little birds at the moment? There's a beautiful one there, just the little 3 of them, but I want these 2 here. But you can tell I'm into little stamp sets at the moment. So what I'm going to do, just turn it on the side. Now, do I want more than 1 set? Let's have a see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink that up with my VersaFine Clair Nocturne, which is the black one. And what I need to do is I need to give that a good inking. I need to make sure it's inked properly because it's actually a shadow stamp. I do apologise, my little fur baby is having a bark there because Ian's taken her out for a walk. So she's getting a little bit excited and she's having a little bark. So I'm just going to add the pheasants there. And I've actually put my card on the side just to make it a little bit easier for me to stamp. It means I'm not moving my hands in funny angles. So just allow that to rest on the card. Just give it time to rest on that oxide ink. There we go. And shall we have 2 lots of the pheasants? Yes, I think we shall have 2 lots of pheasants. I think that'll look quite nice. So we're then going to ink them up again. Again, making sure there's a good layer of ink on there. I'm just going to take my time just to decide. Can you tell that I was concentrating then? Because I always go a little bit quiet when I'm concentrating. It's just what I do. Just allowing that ink again to rest and absorb into the card. There we go, beautiful. And what we're going to do is just take our scrap card and just give that a blot. You need to give it a blot because you will get some ink off there. You can give it a dry if you wish. With your heat tool. I've just blotted for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this little dotty one just for a while. And on the stamp set, on the Beauty of Nature stamp set, there's these 2 little stamps here. I'm going to use those. So let's grab those. Like so. Spending a lot of time moving my card around, have you noticed? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Verdant and just ink those up and start with the Verdant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these like bits of foliage. Now, I know a lot of people, when they use little stamps, they just dab it onto the ink pad like that. I'm not a great fan of that. That's just me personally, because all it does is floods the little stamps. It floods them. And for me, it makes a mess. So I don't like to get in a mess. So I'm just inking the stamp up each time. So I'm just adding a little bit of foliage just to the background. I'm not going to mask the birds off. Just don't need to be honest. Just adding little bits of the foliage just to the ground. It sort of grounds them a little bit and it makes them look more realistic rather than just floating there. If you don't want to add the foliage, you don't have to. It's entirely up to you. But I do like these little stamps for that. There's something about little stamps that I just love. So just so you can see, we're building up that scene. Now I want the shady lane, just for a little bit darker. Let's see if it makes enough of a contrast. Oh yes, a little bit darker, which is quite nice. I don't want to add too many, just offsetting them slightly. So not adding too many, just here and there, and just offsetting them slightly from the others. Just so it looks more like a little bit of a meadow, that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to remove that one. I'm going to give my acrylic block just a bit of a wipe, and I'm going to take this little one like so, and we're going to use that brown, that pine cone, and then I'm just going to add a few of these little dots here and there to add to the foliage. Just to add to that a little bit. So just take your time. You're just enjoying the process of this one. There we go. I know where I've missed now. And you can use first generation, second generation, and just keep adding some more little details with the first and second generation. Second generation just gives you, it allows you a little bit more depth to your design if you add the first, second, third, fourth generation. So this is what you've got so far, which you can't really tell because I've got all that ink on the low tack tape. Let me just clear that off just so you can see where I am. Just so that you can see this is what we've got so far. Just so you can see that. Right, there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blot everything. And what I'm going to do is just take this lower edge here, and I'm going to take the bundled sage. Ink up that bundled sage, and I'm just going to add a little bit more of the bundled sage just around the edge, just at the top of the low tack tape. I'm just adding a little bit more of that bundled sage, just a little bit more of that ink. And what I'm going to do is go on this edge here. And the reason I'm putting the copier paper down, the only reason I'm putting the copier paper down, is so that I don't stick my fingers onto my project. That's it. That's the only reason. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spritz with water. And I'm just going to allow that to sit for a few moments. It's important that we let it sit, because if we don't let it sit, it's not going to react. And this is not going to be a complicated card. It's not going to be anything that's too complicated, but sometimes it's nice to do something simple. And what I'm going to do is just grab my heat tool, and we're just going to give that a little dry. Now the only reason I'm drying is because I'm doing a live video, well, a recorded video, and I'm just drying it. Normally I would just let it dry naturally, but I'm just going to dry this just to speed things up, just because it makes it a little bit quicker for me when I'm doing the card. So I'm just giving that a dry, and then I'm just going to bend that card just so that it's back in position. Just give it a bend. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the low tack tape. And I always think it comes to life when you remove the tape, because you can't quite see what you're doing until you remove the low tack tape. So I'm just removing the low tack tape, and then it sort of comes to life. There we go. That just comes to life a little bit better, don't you think? Right, let me just grab, let me see if we've got some pencils. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more life to my design. So I'm just going to just add a little bit of colour just to some of these leaves, and I'm just using a polychromo pencil. Now the idea is that you don't have to colour every single one in, but you just colour a few just to give a little bit more depth, and polychromos will go over the oxide, which is perfect. So just adding a little bit of colour. And I'm not really pressing on too hard. I'm pressing on quite lightly. And I think at this stage, a good practice is to take a piece of copier paper and just lean on your copier paper. Don't lean on your project. It's just a good practice to get into. The other practice that I really should get into is what I should do really is I should sharpen my pencil, just because it's easier to lay down pigment from the pencil when you've got a nice sharp pencil. So and what I'm going to do, just on those few that I've coloured, just add a little bit more depth, just with a little bit of a darker touch of colour, just down the veining, just as a touch more colour, just around that veining, just to give it a little bit more darkness. And really all I'm doing with this is adding a touch of colour. I'm not adding too much colour, I'm just adding touches of colour just to bring the card to life, just to give it a little bit more depth. That's all I'm doing. So just always with the polychromos, it's always about adding layers of that colour. Now, I'm no colourist. You know, if you're a professional colourist, you know, that's not something I claim to be. So you can just add your layers how you see fit. For this card, it's not about being a professional colourist. It's just about adding a little bit more life to your card. That's all it is. So just bringing it a little bit more to life. And it's just that pop of the limey green. Just from the pencil. Just gives it a little bit more life. Not too much, because you don't want to detract away from everything else, but you just do want to bring it to life a little bit. So what do I want to do now? What I want to do is we just want to bring a little bit of shadowing. So I need a very tiny piece of kitchen roll, I think. Might be better to do it with kitchen roll. You could use a tiny piece of cut and dry foam if you want. But I'm just going to take a little tiny piece of kitchen roll with a little bit of the Nocturne, and I'm just going to add, just bring that up a bit, just a little bit of shadowing, just where the pheasants are. So I'm just using a bit of kitchen roll. You can use a piece of cut and dry foam, but I'm just using a bit of kitchen roll, taking off the excess, and then just adding a little bit of shadow just underneath the pheasants, just so it looks a little bit more realistic. Let's grab that wipe. Right, let's add a little bit more shadow. So we're just going to add a little bit of Inktense pencil just around this, just a little bit. Let's get my water brush. I've hardly laid down any pigment. I'm just going to so I haven't laid down too much pigment from the Inktense pencil, just so that it doesn't, because those colours are very subtle, I don't want it to be too much. I don't want the shading to be too much, so I've just added a little subtle touch. And what I'm going to do then, let's hope everything's dry, because I'm just going to add a little bit of a touch of whiteness here and there, just where the light would hit, just a little bit of lightness, just here and there, just where a little bit of the whiteness would hit. Just where it would be a little bit lighter. So I'm just adding a little bit of white pen, just where that would hit. And what we're going to do then is we're going to grab some Posca pens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more colour. Now, got red, Posca pen, and I'm just going to add some little dots of Posca pen as if I'm adding red flowers when I'm not, but just so it looks like I'm adding. Let me just show you. I will show you this. Just bear with me a second. Just adding a few touches. Let me just lift this up. Just bringing a little bit of life to the design. Woo, nearly fell over then. Just adding a little bit of life to the design as if I'm creating sort of a meadow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hopefully look for a yellow Posca pen. So I've got a yellow one. Now this is a very fine one, so hopefully it will add a few little yellow dots. They're very subtle. Have I got a bigger yellow pen? This is when you know, I think, oh, I don't need that many Posca pens. And then I wish I bought all the colours in the rainbow. What about orange and a bit of pink? I've not got a yellow one that's... No, I've only got a fine yellow one, so we'll have to add some fine yellow dots. As if like you're creating a meadow. So I'm adding these dots and it's like my meadow. As if I'm adding like a meadow of flowers. It's my make-believe flowers. So you're pretending you're sort of in a meadow. I do want some yellow. I always think yellow just brightens everything up, personally. There's just something about yellow. Let me show you that. Just looks like you're in a little meadow. And can you see the touches of white? Just on the... You can see where I've added the shadowing here. Just so they look a little bit more grounded. And then I'm going to take my gel pen and just add some little white dots as if these were berries. So I'm just adding some little white dots. Just as if they were berries. With a little bit of shine on them. There we go. Oh no, don't put your gel pen there, Tracy. Let me just move these Posca pens. Now you know that I want to buy a yellow thick Posca pen, don't you? What I want now is I want a nice sentiment. And I've got the perfect sentiment on this stamp set. I think that one, the beauty of nature is everywhere. I think that's perfect. Perfect sentiment. Can I find my perfect block? No, because I've just chucked it down. Take my sentiment. There's that's it. Let's make sure that we've got that. There we go. And I'm going to ink that up with my Nocturne Black. Just making sure it's got a good layer of ink, even when it's just a sentiment. Now what you can do is you can hover around where you want it. I already know that I want it there. The beauty of nature is everywhere. Now, you don't need to stamp and press these too hard. You just need to make sure that you give them a light press. Just so that you can see that. The beauty of nature is everywhere. What a stunning sentiment. Absolutely stunning. And what I'm going to do, now I'm quite happy, I'm just going to extend this a little bit more. And just bring a little bit more shading to this. Just turn your card, Tracy. And as I said before, just use your copier paper if you don't want to mess your work up. And what you're doing is you're going to activate, spit it out, you're going to activate the Inktense pencil, but also if you come out a bit, you'll remove some of the colour of the oxide and you'll create like a halo. So just picking up the water, just going around and then just dab and you create like a halo because you remove some of that oxide. There we go. Let me just so that you can see that. Just love how that looks. Just such a one layer card, you know, with no dimension, but it looks like it's got lots of life. I just love that. I love the sentiment. This beauty of nature is everywhere. Now, where's my... You can always use your acetate, and if you want, you can add some of the pheasants here. You can leave it like that, or you can add some of those pheasants here. So I'm just going to experiment. I've dropped the stamp because I picked it up and then let them drop because I'm good like that. Tell you what, I'm dangerous with these acrylic blocks. Just move that out the way. Just make sure they're straight. You can easily use a lined rule like here, like your glass mat, and make sure that's straight. Now, you could place that there, but I think that's going to be too much for me. I don't want to detract away from what we've done. I think it's a shame if we put too much and we detract from what we've done. What I'm looking at here is, this says inspired by nature. You could also add the word nature, which I'm going to add. I know I want a little bit of something, but I don't want to overpower everything. So I'm just using that word nature, where it says inspired by nature. I'm just inking the nature word up. I'm just going to add that here. That's it. Just wanted a little word just to give me the balance from here to here. So I'm quite happy with that. Let me just give that a blot. I like to get into the habit of just giving everything a little blot. Can you see the white on the birds? Just so it looks like the lights hit them on the top. So what you need to decide then is whether you want to put any white splatters. I don't think I want any white splatters this time because I think it looks nice and classy. So what I'm going to do, so the card's 5 by 7 and I'm going to add it to a mat that's 1/4 inch bigger. So that'll be 5 1/4 by 7 1/4. And it's Friday tomorrow again. And I'm hoping for a nice relaxing Friday. Now if the weather's quite nice, I think I'm going to have a go at doing some cuttings from some of my plants. If they don't work, I've not lost anything. And I've got a card blank that is 5 1/2 by 7 1/2. I'm just going to add that to the card blank. I just think that little pop of white with the white border and the white card just brings everything to life. Now if you're unsure, just take a piece of clean copier paper and press everything down with clean copier paper, just so that you don't get no dirty finger marks on there. And that is your card done, just so that you can see that. Just tilt it to the side. You can see those ivies. I love the sentiment. Just think the sentiment is stunning. I love how it goes stamped over the imagery, and I love those pheasants. And that is your nice simple card done. Don't forget, if you want to add an insert, you could stamp the pheasant just here on the inside. In fact, what we could do is just cut a piece of white card. Let's see if we've got a piece of white card. So I'll just cut a piece of white card now, 5 by 7, and we'll do that live now, just so that we can just finish the card off properly. Just to add an insert, what you could do is add those other pheasants. I think they'll be nice. So just get rid of that sentiment. I've got too many stamp sets on my desk. So take these pheasants. I love these little pheasants. It's just the size of the birds that I just think are gorgeous. Add them here, just so these can be added to the inside of the card. I just think that stamp's beautiful. Just give my fingers a wipe, just so you can see closely that image. Just think that looks beautiful. And if you wanted, you could add a sentiment inside. I'm not going to. I just want to leave it like that. So I'm going to add that to the inside. Or if you wanted to, you could add one of those nature sentiments to the inside as well. Just lift that up. Just think it looks nice and professional with a bit of an insert on the inside. So then you've got your card, open it up, and you've got that lovely bit of a little suggestion from what's on the front cover. So I hope you enjoyed that card. I hope you'll give that a go and tag me in your posts. I hope you all have a lovely weekend ahead, and I'll see you all soon. Love to all. Bye for now.